Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 142 based on novel. So let's start. Qin Mu was in a daze. Heavenly Feather World had collided and overlapped the world in which great ruins existed, thus the sky of Heavenly Feather World was great ruins. It was an abnormal sight to behold. It was a pity he probably couldn't see it anymore. Heavenly Feather World had been under the ancient founding Emperor Empire, but because it had suffered a calamity, those under it lost all protection. Because of that, the devil god could find Heavenly Feather World and assimilate all of its people. Founding Emperor Calamity had happened 20,000 years ago. It was also at that time that it turned into great ruins. The territory of founding Emperor Empire was not only in great ruins, it even had other worlds. He couldn't help getting lost in wild and fanciful thoughts. Founding Emperor Empire had conquered other worlds and administered such wonderful ones as Heavenly Feather Clan, with all kinds of life forms. Living in that era had to have been interesting. I've heard that this place was known as Celestial Heavens, Yu Zhaoqing said. The Emperor is someone who ruled over all the various heavens. Qin Mu instantly thought of the time when he had brought Xiongxiu and her daughter through great ruins and the sight he'd seen when they passed by West Heaven Palace. Its ruins had a diagonal piece of land stabbed into it. All kinds of majestic buildings had crumbling fences and dilapidated walls. Pillars had collapsed and were sticking out in all directions, while shattered pieces of huge machinery were hidden among the mountain rocks. Qin Mu composed himself and immediately pushed away his peculiar thoughts. Body replicator Devil God is already dead, so you guys are safe now. Chief Yu, what's your plan? Rebuild our country and return to our homeland. Yu Zhaoqing's clothes gave off a gentle trembling sound, and they soon transformed into an armor. Her battle spirit mixed, while a murderous aura, and overflowed into the sky. I want to lead my clansmen back to Heavenly Feather World. There are many other devil races there, the assistants of Body Replicator, Devil God, who had seized the treasured lands of my Heavenly Feather clan. I need to seize them back, and kill all the enemies so we can rebuild our homeland. There are other devil races in Heavenly Feather World. Astonished, Qin Mu calculated it for a moment. Heavenly Feather Clan is only left with these few millions of people. Will you have the power to seize Heavenly Feather World back? Yu Zhaoqing was full of confidence. Due to Body Replicator Devil God's death, the other clansmen should have also returned to their senses. We, the Heavenly Feather Clan, rely on brain waves to converse with each other. When we fight, it's as easy as commanding our arms, so it won't be hard to seize Heavenly Feather World back. Chief Yu, the paths, skills, and divine arts of the current era are different from those in the past. You guys have been controlled by Body Replicator, Devil God for so many years, so you probably don't understand the current era. When on the battlefield, your brain waves can easily be intercepted. You had been controlled for so many years, so your enemies should have already learned everything there is to learn about you. In their eyes, all of you are lambs waiting to be slaughtered. His vital chi burst forth, and he executed a divine art. His vital chi transformed into all kinds of strange runes to form the shape of a huge upside-down work. The runes trembled continuously, while giving off sound waves that were hard for ordinary people to hear. However, in the ears of Yu Zhaoqing, it was like a loud and resonating bell was ringing continuously, disrupting her mind. The noise deafened her and made her unable to establish a connection with her clansmen. Qin Mu dispersed his divine art and said, Chief Yu, I feel you should take your time and not rush into things. Yu Zhaoqing's heart was in a mess, and the clothes on her body went through various colors. Messy markings of all shades appeared, making it obvious that her mind was not steady. Qin Mu had only interacted with Heavenly Feather Clan for the first time, but he had swiftly realized that the mental connection between them could be exploited. The strong practitioners of the devil race would definitely be aware of it after having studied them for a long time. If Heavenly Feather Clan couldn't take out any new abilities, rebuilding their homeland would just be a joke. Returning to Heavenly Feather World was certain death. Eternal Peace Empire is currently in the middle of a reform, and all kinds of paths, skills, and divine arts are rapidly progressing, Qin Mu said. Why don't you all settle down in Eternal Peace Empire first to learn new abilities? When you guys mastered something new, you can then return to Heavenly Feather World to take back your land. Yu Zhaoqing was slightly hesitant. As the chief, she wanted for more than anything to return to Heavenly Feather World and sweep away all the devils there. Yet as Qin Mu had said, returning was certain death, so she had to take her time. Chief, you probably still doesn't know, but this person beside you isn't any outsider. It's His Highness, sun-haired chief suddenly said. His Highness. Yu Zhaoqing suppressed the conflict in her heart and asked suspiciously, what highness? The highness of our sun-haired tribe, and also the highness of your Heavenly Feather Clan, sun-haired chief said deeply and meaningfully. Yu Zhaoqing's heart trembled violently, and she immediately fell on her knee. Her clothes changed into the outfit of a subject, and she greeted Qin Mu once more. Where are all these etiquettes coming from? Founding Emperor Empire is long gone, so I'm not your highness anymore. Sister Yu, please don't scare me. Qin Mu immediately helped her up, and pinched the clothes on her body. He felt that the texture was smooth and humid. He asked with a smile, what are the clothes on Sister Yu's body made of? Zhao Yuqing looked at sun-haired chief in doubt, and he also frowned. Qin Mu seemed to be unwilling to admit that he was the Royal Highness of Carefree Village. He didn't acknowledge his identity in front of him, and he also didn't acknowledge it in front of Yu Zhaoqing. Your Highness, the clothes on my body are actually my skin and wings, Yu Zhaoqing explained. The structure of our Heavenly Feather Clan's body is different from yours. We have numerous thin wings, but we have no feathers. Instead, we have scales. When our mood changes, they will change in color as well. My Heavenly Feather Clansmen have quite a way in dressing ourselves. When Qin Mu heard her clothes were none other than skin, he couldn't help pinching it again. He discovered that the scales weren't hard. On the contrary, they were actually soft like skin. Yu Zhaoqing's face blushed from his pinching. Your Highness, you can't. Qin Mu let go and couldn't help feeling that it was a great pity. He had wanted to ask Yu Zhaoqing for a few sets of clothes like that. However, her people grew them on their body as part of it, so they couldn't be taken off, and he could only drop the thought. Sai Yinxiang, Ling Yuxiu, and Hu Linga came over and touched the clothes on the woman's body while clicking their tongues in wonder. As they did that, Yu Zhaoqing's face became even redder. She didn't want to let them touch, but she was too embarrassed to refuse them. She could only stand there uncomfortably. The texture is truly wonderful, it's even smoother than Linga's fur. The girls couldn't help sighing in admiration. Ling Yuxiu asked curiously, Chief Yu, if winter comes and the world is freezing, won't you guys feel cold with just that? Yu Zhaoqing shook her head and said, the 4 seasons in our Heavenly Feather World are all comfortably warm, there's no cold weather. Besides, if the weather gets freezing, our scales can be inflated with air to keep us warm. Take a look. While she was saying that, the clothes on her body became thick and puffy, but the design was still very pleasing to the eyes. Everyone exclaimed endlessly in admiration. Sun-haired chief stood to the side, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. They had come to Sun Shrine to discuss the important matters of their clan, yet it had become a meeting to admire clothing. After the commotion, Qin Mu said, Chief Yu, you can bring your clansmen to stay in Great Ruins, or follow me to Eternal Peace Empire. When the time is ripe, you can then lead your army back to Heavenly Feather World. What do you think? Yu Zhaoqing pondered it for a moment. Your Highness, please wait a moment, let me discuss it with my clansmen before coming to a decision. Qin Mu nodded and Yu Zhaoqing left to do as she had said. Chief, let us go and take a look at the sun that was split. Qin Mu rose and came with everyone to the center of the two halves of the sun. Numerous sun herders were trying to pull the chains out from the two lumps. They planned to use the chains of Sun Ship to bring up another sun from Sunwell. Qin Mu had smashed the sun on Sun Ship into two halves, so they needed to get a new sun to be the energy source for Sun Ship. Otherwise, the new Sun Guardian would be absorbed by the huge ship. Yet the chain was embedded in the sun. Even when it was split into half, it was still very difficult to pull the chains out. Qin Mu walked toward the interior of the hemisphere, and saw that the inside contained a complicated three-dimensional formation structure. Thousands of formations had to be activated for the sun that had once been a golden ball to radiate astonishing rays and firepower. Because of what Qin Mu had done, numerous formations had gotten damaged. When the sun hit its target, numerous components were lost. There were over a dozen sun herders who had entered the sun to undo the chains. However, no matter how much strength they exerted, they still couldn't pull them out. Is there anyone proficient in formation skills? An elder asked loudly. These chains are stuck in over a dozen formations, and they need to be undone for us to achieve anything. The numerous sun herders that were busy immediately stopped in their work and greeted Qin Mu. He returned the greetings and examined the interior formations in detail. The chains that locked the sun went from the surface into the core, and there were over a dozen formations that were clasping tightly onto the four chains. The old chief was also examining the structure of the formations. When he saw the complicated runes on the components, his eyes were dazzled. He shook his head and said, "There are no formation masters in our sun herders, so we won't be able to undo them." Qin Mu pondered it before saying, "I finally understand why Ziqing couldn't forge Sunwell and Moonwell even after 100 years. Everyone looked at him, rather puzzled. They didn't know why he suddenly talked about Ziqing forging the wells. The structure of the formations in this sun is actually that of divine eyes. Qin Mu walked between all the formations and differentiated the runes on top of them while speaking rapidly. The emperor must have ordered Ziqing to forge the wells, because he had seen her abilities. She must have been the #1 divine eyes back then. The attainments in her divine eyes had to have been matchless, so the emperor had ordered her to forge sun and moon well. He quickly browsed through the structures of the formations that were locking the chains once more. Coming out of the sun, he carefully examined the surface. It wasn't smooth, but with numerous markings like those of a tree's grains. The reason why Ziqing did nothing for 100 years was because she had already realized that to forge sun and moon well, she would need to use her divine eyes as a sacrifice. When the wells were done, she would become blind. That was why she spent 100 years to enjoy her life to the fullest. Qin Mu felt around the surface of the sun, and after a moment, he found a circular marking that was jutting out at one spot. His vital qi flowed out, and he instantly saw the marking light up, before starting to spin continuously. At the same time, the dozen and more formations that were holding back the chains started to operate and slowly loosened. Qin Mu nodded and said, "Only when the emperor got angry did she put in all her heart and will to forge the wells." She then dug out her eyes to light up sun well and moon well. In front of them, the interior structure of the sun was changing continuously as the formations were being solved with resounding bangs. The surface of the sun and the complicated markings were also lighting up continuously. Huge pieces on the surface started moved backward layer by layer. The half of the sun seemed to have come alive, and it frightened everyone into moving backward in alarm. They only saw the formations of the sun changing continuously, until it shrunk into a solid metal wall erected upright in front of them. Qin Mu then came to the front of the other half of the sun, and did the exact same thing. In the end, it also turned into a solid metal wall. The two of them stood upright in front of everyone. They were golden in color, as simple and unadorned. The height was around 300 yards, and they were several miles long. God Ziqing knew that she had to sacrifice her divine eyes to the well in order to complete the emperor's mission, so she spent 100 years to enjoy her life to the fullest before using another 50 years to complete the emperor's request. What an extraordinary woman! Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. When he looked at the two walls, respect appeared on his face. He then said in a low voice, "She's called Ziqing. Zi means big sister, and Qing means green. It says that she was a big sister that liked wearing green in her family. What a pity I won't have the fate to meet such an extraordinary person. What happened to you guys?" He looked back and saw everyone staring at him blankly. They were all flabbergasted. Qin Mu couldn't help being bewildered. He explained, "Zi means sister and Qing is green. Ziqing means a big sister wearing green." "And not this," an elder stuttered. "Your Highness, you have solved the formations in the sun." Qin Mu realized what he meant and smiled. "It wasn't hard to solve it. I've done some research in regards to divine arts about the divine eyes. In Eternal Peace Empire, I even forged a divine eye that had a pretty similar structure. Of course, it isn't as intricate as this sun." Ziqing was really remarkable. He raised his head to look at the two walls. "I've learned quite a lot of stuff. I really want to go into the well to look at her eyes." In regards to divine eyes, Qin Mu had seen much and was familiar with their structure. He had learned Blind's 9 Heavens Eyes Awakening skill, and even forged Sunshot Divine Cannon, as well as obtained Sun Jade Eye and Moon Jade Eye. No matter how complicated was the interior structure of the sun Ziqing had forged, it had many surface changes, but no departure from the original standard. When others saw such a complicated structure, they would usually be unable to find a solution. However, he was able to quickly find all the crucial points in all kinds of formations. Ziqing had forged the sun not to use it as a weapon. Instead, it was used for lighting up the surroundings, so her formations had no power and were not dangerous. He could try them out without any worry. On top of that, Ziqing also left behind a mechanism to put away the sun. When it was activated, the sun would change into a metal wall. Because the sun had been smashed into half by Qin Mu, it had become 2 metal walls. Numerous sun herders suppressed the shock in their hearts and pulled out the chains. "Without a hook, how can we fish out another sun out from Sunwell?" Everyone looked at Qin Mu with hope. The old chief immediately shook his head. "His Highness's cultivation is not high enough. He can't go deep into Sunwell and bring up a sun." The temperature in Sunwell was extremely high, to the point that anything that the sun herders forged would melt after being lowered inside. It would be even worse for Qin Mu, who was only a divine arts practitioner of 6 directions realm. Qin Mu smiled and said, "Chief, have you forgotten? After becoming the Sun Guardian, I can control the energy of Sunship, so won't I have the magic power of a heavenly god that way? As long as I can fish the sun out, I will be able to break free and won't need to fear being swallowed up by Sunship." "What if you can't bring one up?" the old chief said with hesitation. "There's no what if. Since I was the one to smash your sun, I have to be the one to get another one." Qin Mu made a prompt decision and stretched his hand out to grab onto a pillar. As his body expanded, he remembered something and transmitted his voice to the old chief. "Chief, help me prepare a set of clothes. My spare clothes are all used up." The old chief didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Every time Qin Mu transformed into the Sun Guardian, he would rip apart his clothes and have to change to a spare set. The clothes in his reserves had all been used up, he was wearing the last set. After fishing out the sun, if he didn't have new clothes, his buttocks would definitely be bare. That was because the complete form of the sun guardian had a third leg growing out from the buttocks, which would rip the pants. Fetch our heavenly young golden silk, weave it into fabric to make a set of clothes for His Highness. After saying that, the old chief suddenly recalled something and hurriedly added, invite Chief Yu of Heavenly Feather Clan. Let her tailor the fabric for His Highness and make sure they are fitting and dignified. A few sun herders immediately left to carry out the task. Qin Mu controlled Sun Ship, and its 12 legs took wide strides toward Sunwell. Sun Ship had no sun, so it was started to absorb his life force, causing his body to slowly sink deeper and deeper into the deck. He was gradually fusing with the ship. The speed of exhaustion was many times faster when compared to the time when the sun was just extinguished. He had to fish out a sun as soon as possible. If the time was dragged out, it would become more and more dangerous. Besides Sunwell, Qin Mu's violent magic power swept up the chains inside. They were like black dragons that slithered forward into the core of another galaxy. That place was no other than Sunwell, a circular abyss that had countless suns that were like balls of light. In the meantime, outside the well, stars were shining. They were of all forms and colors as they formed the Milky Way, which was revolving around the two wells, circulating continuously. Even though the chains of Sun Ship were thick, they were like a few thin strings when compared to Sunwell, so the sight was indeed like they were fishing. Qin Mu, who was at top of the well, looked like a real fisherman. The chains went into Sunwell and Qin Mu's palms trembled. He frowned slightly. The chains had gone as far as they could, but they still didn't reach the suns. Chief, order everyone to leave the ship. Qin Mu shouted loudly. Sun Herd Chief immediately passed down his words, and everyone on the ship flew up in a hurry. Right after, they saw Sun Ship opening up its 12 legs and walking into the light pillar of Sunwell. The huge ship slanted forward and walked into the well. In the center of the 4 pillars, Qin Mu's giant body, which was like that of a heavenly god, was shaking from the somewhat bumpy ride. He had the incomparably huge ship enter the Star Sea. Your Highness, Sun Ship has already swallowed your thighs, the old chief shouted out. Don't stay too long, or you will be swallowed by Sun Ship. In Constellation C, a huge ship was walking straight down the light pillar. At its bow, there was a giant holding onto the chains to get to the abyss below. Around him were stars of different colors swirling continuously. In the abyss, the huge suns radiated with dazzling rays, which made it hard to open one's eyes. Qin Mu's face and chest were turning red from the scorching heat as though he was going to melt. 9 Heaven's Eyes awakening skill had already been activated, so he could withstand the intense rays to look at everything in the well. Sun Ship was closing to the abyss while growing red hot, but luckily, it had been forged by ancient gods, so it wasn't smelted that easily. Finally, Qin Mu saw the chains touch one of the suns. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. At that moment, he noticed that Sun Ship had already swallowed his waist. Crap! Without the sun as an energy source, the absorbing speed is way too fast. Qin Mu composed himself and gritted his teeth. With the 4 chains as his hands, he gently touched the surface of the sun and found where the mechanism located. His body was sinking bit by bit into the ship, and soon, the ship went past his waist. Without the sun, utilizing the energy of Sun Ship would cause him to suffer from the drawback. The speed of it surpassed Qin Mu's expectation. It's not this formation marking. Not this as well. Even if he had activated the 9 heavens in his eyes, he still couldn't make out the markings on the surface of the sun. He could only rely on the 4 chains to touch and differentiate them. The 4 chains were like 4 huge dragons that were moving slowly. His magic power leaked out from them to form vital chi threads, which he used to differentiate the structure of the markings on the sun's surface. It's not this either. His body had already been swallowed to the neck, yet Qin Mu still hadn't found the location of the mechanism. Cold sweat formed on his forehead, but before it could even flow out from his pores, it evaporated. It then turned into hot air that floated around him. Sun Ship swallowed Qin Mu up to the neck, and he raised his head so his mouth would stay outside. He tried his best to mobilize Sun Ship so its deck would face sunwell. Qin Mu's eyes stared fiercely at it while his body kept on sinking downwards, covering his mouth. His nose was about to be covered up too. In the end, even his eyes were close to sinking into Sun Ship. His nose bridge was gradually covered. The instant his eyes was about to be gone too, he saw an eye in the sun. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Zi Qing's divine eye. That eye was as dazzling as a sun, and it seemed to be staring back at him. It gave Qin Mu a kind of strange feeling. When watched by that eye, he instantly felt layers of formations appear in his eyes. That feeling didn't last long, for Sun Ship had drowned out his eyes. Found it. Qin Mu's consciousness trembled, and he felt an abnormal touch coming from his own vital qi. He immediately gathered all his magic power, and the majestic vital qi flooded down the 4 chains to rush at the mechanism on the surface of the sun. He could only hear cranking sounds as the formation on the sun's surface was activated. The 4 chains pierced through, led by the formation. In Sun Ship, Qin Mu instantly felt the boundless strength coming from the sun flooding over. At that moment, Sun Ship had completely swallowed him up, to the point that only his nose tip could be seen. Whoosh! The 4 chains pulled a sun out from the well, and it floated up into the sky, pulling the chains taut. Outside Sunwell, the old chief looked at the light pillar nervously. Too much time has passed, too much. His Highness might not have been able to endure any later. He won't be able to escape from Sun Ship. Suddenly, light burst forth in Sunwell, and a sun slowly rose from the light pillar. Everyone was forced to move back, as heat waves swept past them in all directions. Afterward, Sun Ship's huge body came out from the well with its 12 legs slowly landing on the ground. Thump! The body of the ship descended, and the land shook, causing lava to flow into numerous canals. Sun Ship was pretty stable. The old chief hurriedly flew up, and barged to the center of the 4 pillars. He saw Qin Mu lying there naked, unmoving. Too much of his life force had been taken by Sun Ship. Even though he captured a sun and was saved, his life force couldn't be recovered. Move away, all move away. Hu Linga sprinted over, her feet getting scalded by the scorching ground until green smoke came out. I have medicine here. The old chief and the rest opened up a path, and Hu Linga flew to Qin Mu. She didn't care that her feet were blistering from the heat. In a hurry, she stuffed the spirit pills that Qin Mu had made for Yang Jingjing into his mouth. She used her vital qi to guide them into his abdomen, and catalyzed the medicinal energy. When it was finished, Qin Mu slowly woke up, feeling that his body was extremely weak. He didn't even have the energy to open his eyes and could only gasp for breath. Hu Linga let out a sigh of relief and only then felt her feet hurting. She immediately jumped onto the old chief's head, her eyes tearing up from the pain. The old chief hurriedly raised Qin Mu while shouting, quickly, to the lake. After a moment, on the small island at the center of Sun Ship, Qin Mu was placed in a hot spring that was at the heart of the island. Beside him was a frail little girl also soaking in the water. Little brother who herds cows. The frail girl smiled weakly. Hu Linga sat on the old chief's head, not daring to let her feet touch the ground, so she requested boldly and confidently to soak in the hot spring as well. My feet are also injured. The old chief was helpless and could only place her in the hot spring. Little ancestor, this hot spring is not normal water, but condensed from the qi of pure yang. You can soak in it, but you can't piss in it. Bah, only you will piss inside. Hu Ling'er sat down excitedly and felt waves of energy from the water flooding her body to nourish her limbs and bones. Her divine treasures, spirit embryo, souls, and spirits felt comfortable, without any being an exception. She looked at the frail girl beside and said in delight, "Sister Jing of Yang family. So you're here. Young master, why aren't you opening your eyes?" "That's right, when you were sprawled there earlier, your butt was seen by all." Qin Mu gradually opened his eyes, and white light blinded the two girls. It was like countless suns had burst forth with intense brightness, making their eyes tear from the sting. Qin Mu closed his eyes, and after a moment, Hu Ling'er and Yang Jingjing slowly recovered. "In Sunwell, I saw Zi Qing's divine eye." Qin Mu didn't dare to open his eyes again. "After that, many things appeared in my eyes. It was like her eyes had imprinted something in mine." "Can you see anything now?" Yang Jingjing asked with nervousness. "I can." Yang Jingjing's eyes had been treated by Qin Mu and were more and less healed. She could see, but her body was still somewhat frail. She immediately came to Qin Mu's side and pressed down on his shoulders while saying softly, "We, the Sun Herd tribe, also have a technique to cultivate our eyes. It's called Pleiades Sun Star Hoops. Wait for me to execute it before opening your eyes so I can help you take a look." Qin Mu waited for a moment, then Yang Jingjing said, "Done." He opened his eyes, and the divine light in them burst forth, washing the surroundings in snow-white light. He then took note of the frail girl moving to the front of his face and looking at his pupils seriously. Her eyes seemed to have star hoops that shrouded her pupils. The star hoops were circulating continuously and withstanding the power of his divine eyes. Yang Jingjing examined him in detail and moved to the front of his eyes to differentiate the markings. Qin Mu didn't dare to breathe, as he was afraid of blowing his breath on her face. It's a kind of rune marking that has resulted in a formation. Yang Jingjing breathed out, and he smelled orchids and iris as she pondered while examining his eyes. "The outer layer looks like Pleiades sun star hoops of our Sun Herd tribe, but there are other markings in the inner layers. There are a total of 2, 3, 4 layers." She inspected Qin Mu's pupils carefully, and saw the layers of space inside. The runes formed a strange structure that was like layers of sun hoops that stretched back continuously. She couldn't see clearly how many of them there were. "Inside your eye, in the centermost area of the layers of Pleiades sun star hoops, there seems to be a sun. It could also be formed by the star hoops." She finished her examination and said, "I shall teach you Pleiades sun star hoops, my pupil divine art. Try and see if you can control the markings in your eyes with it." Qin Mu nodded with difficulty. Only then did Yang Jingjing notice that her face was so close to his that they almost came into contact. Qin Mu didn't dare to nod, because he was afraid of hitting her. Their gazes met, and the stars' hoops in their eyes flashed with brilliant rays. However, at that moment, Hu Ling'er's voice sounded out. "Young master, is the examination done yet? Why is there no sound now?" Qin Mu immediately said, "Still not done yet." Yang Jingjing burst into laughter, and her breath assaulted him in the face. Hu Ling'er heard it and was slightly suspicious. With her arms and legs, she splashed around in the water to swim over with her tails floating on the surface. Qin Mu's gaze was too bright, so she couldn't see him. However, she could head toward the sound and stop between the two of them. Half of her body popped out of the water, and she shook her tails, flinging water on the face of the boy and the girl. Qin Mu and Yang Jingjing immediately split apart, and suppressed the stray thoughts in their hearts. Qin Mu closed his eyes. Hu Ling'er sat in the center, separating them. Yang Jingjing immediately said, I shall teach you Pleiades' sun star hoops, so listen carefully. She then explained it to him. Qin Mu asked whenever he was in doubt and soon mastered Pleiades' sun star hoops. He tried to execute it, and the layers of star hoops in his pupils extinguished one after another. However, there were still some runes that were swimming in his pupils. He opened his eyes, and there was no longer any more astonishing rays shooting out. However, in the depths of his pupils, there would be a ray of light flashing from time to time. Pleiades' sun star hoops didn't close the sun markings that were in the core. Yang Jingjing swam over from the side and examined his pupils before pondering for a moment. Pleiades' sun star hoops should be part of that divine eyes technique. It isn't complete, so the sun markings couldn't be completely closed. Hu Linga went to Qin Mu's side and examined his right eye as though she knew what she was doing. Young master, there are stars in your eyes. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's Pleiades' sun star hoops. Sister Jing and I are currently discussing them, so don't create trouble. Sister Jing, the imprints in God Zi Qing's eyes were mirrored in mine, so we might just be able to master her divine eyes from them. Her divine eyes were definitely the number one divine eyes in founding emperor era. If we could master them, it will be extraordinary. Yang Jingjing pondered over it and said, it's impossible to master the number one divine eyes just from the imprints alone. Even though I've learned Pleiades' sun star hoops, I can't rely on it to deduce the technique of the number one divine eyes. It's simply too difficult. Someone can do it. Qin Mu's eyes lit up as he was filled with confidence. Grandpa blind from my family, he could definitely restore God Zi Qing's technique, just from these imprints. Grandpa blind? Yang Jingjing asked curiously. Isn't he someone whose eyes can't see anymore? Qin Mu was fully confident in blind's abilities. Even though he's blind, his eyesight is very good. He's the person with the highest attainments in divine eyes that I've met. Yang Jingjing was even more bewildered. Puzzled, she asked, he's blind, so how can his eyesight be very good? Grandpa blind has the best eyesight. Grandpa mute doesn't have many words, but he scolds people fiercely. Grandpa cripple runs the fastest. One-armed old ma has the best fist skills. Grandpa butcher, who only has half a body, is the fiercest in fights, and even though Grandpa deaf can't hear, is the best in understanding others. Qin Mu smiled. There's also the most beautiful Granny Sai, the cutest grandpa apothecary, who's number one in both curing and poisoning others. However, the most powerful of them all is still village chief, who has no arms or legs. His sword skills are the best in this world. Yang Jingjing was at a loss, then she said with excitement, I want to go out and take a look. When your sickness is cured, I'll bring you out. Qin Mu said. It's almost New Year's. I reckon we'll be eating at Granny's house this time. Do you want to go together? Sure. Yang Jingjing was indescribably excited, but her face turned dull soon. She shook her head and said, I need to stay in the tribe. There can't be no one looking after Sun's ship. If the devils come again. Qin Mu smiled and said, it's fine. I have caught a new sun and killed body replicator devil god. So there shouldn't be any enemy attacks for a little while. I'll send you back after New Year's. Yang Jingjing was delighted yet nervous. I have never left my tribesmen and went out alone before. With me around, you can be at ease. This video will end here.